What you're about to witness happened in a remote village in eastern Nigeria, where 6 young graduates thought they were simply completing their national service. Instead, they awakened something ancient, something furious, something that turned their peaceful assignment into a living nightmare. Picture this: thousands of serpents pouring from every crack in the earth, slithering through homes, coiling around doorposts, their eyes glowing with supernatural rage. Rivers turning blood red. An entire village fleeing in terror. And at the center of it all, 6 young Nigerians who had no idea that killing one snake would unleash the wrath of a goddess. 6 fresh graduates had just received their National Youth Service Corps posting. Emmanuel, a computer science major from Lagos, Nedu, an engineering student from Abuja; Prince, a business administration graduate from Port Harcourt; Ada, a literature student from Enugu; Bola, an accounting graduate from Ibadan; and Ruth, a mass communication student from Kano. Their destination was Umuse, a village so remote that the nearest major town was 3 hours away by unpaved roads. When their bus finally stopped at the village center, a clearing surrounded by ancient Iroko trees and traditional mud houses, they stepped into a world that felt like stepping back in time. The air was thick with palm wine and wood smoke. Children stared with curious eyes while elderly women examined the newcomers with careful attention. "Welcome to the village," said Mr. Okri, their local liaison. "You will find our people warm and welcoming, but please remember, we have customs here that must be respected." To 6 young, educated city dwellers, it sounded like the usual speech about respecting elders. They had no idea this warning would soon mean the difference between life and death. Their accommodation was modest but clean: 2 rooms for the men, 2 for the women, with shared facilities. As they settled in that first evening, sharing rice and stew prepared by local women, they marveled at the village's peace. No traffic noise, no urban chaos, just crickets, distant conversations, and wind through ancient trees. Over the next 2 days, they began their assignments, teaching at the primary school, assisting at the health clinic, helping with agricultural extension services. The villagers were warm and welcoming, though the graduates noticed peculiarities. People stopped mid-sentence when certain topics arose. There were areas where locals seemed reluctant to go after dark. And everyone watched where they walked with unusual care. But to understand what was about to unfold, you must understand the spiritual foundation of Umuse. This wasn't simply a collection of homes, it was a sacred space, protected by forces that predated any modern religion by thousands of years. According to village history, their ancestors had fled tribal wars and stumbled upon this forest clearing with its natural spring and rich soil. But they weren't alone. The forest was home to Ik, the great snake goddess, an ancient python spirit who was protector of waters, guardian of harvest, keeper of prosperity and peace. The first settlers encountered her representatives, massive pythons that moved through the village without fear, coiling peacefully outside homes, watching over the community with intelligent eyes. Instead of killing these serpents, the wise settlers recognized them as divine messengers, sacred guardians. A pact was made. Ik would protect the village from enemies, ensure good harvest, keep waters clean, and watch over the people's welfare. In return, villagers would never harm her children, the snakes that lived among them. This wasn't superstition. This was a spiritual contract that had governed village life for over 3 centuries. King Bantu, the current traditional ruler, was the 7th in his lineage to maintain this covenant. Chief priest Zema served as direct intermediary between the village and Ik, reading signs, interpreting the goddess's moods, ensuring ancient protocols were maintained. Every child born in Umuse learned that snakes were sacred. They were taught to step carefully, never throw stones, never disturb resting serpents. Harming a snake wasn't just forbidden, it was spiritual suicide. The village was filled with stories of violators. A colonial administrator who shot a python in the 1940s died of fever within a week. A traveling merchant who killed a snake that startled his horse saw his entire caravan struck by lightning. But there were also stories of protection and blessing. Families showing reverence found their crops flourishing, children healthy, businesses prosperous. The village had been spared from wars, famines, and epidemics that devastated neighboring communities. The snakes of Umuse weren't ordinary serpents. They moved with almost human grace, avoiding contact but showing no fear. They could be found sunning on windowsills, coiled around tree bases, drinking from streams where children fetched water. Most remarkably, Despite the large python population, there had never been a single recorded snakebite in the village's history. The serpents lived among people in perfect harmony, understanding their role as protectors rather than predators. This was the world Emmanuel, Nedu, Prince, Ada, Bola, and Ruth had entered, a place where spiritual and physical realms coexisted in delicate balance, where ancient laws held more power than modern legislation, where disturbing the peace carried consequences that education couldn't address. Mr. Okori had tried to warn them during their first evening. "Our village is blessed by forces older than memory," he said. "We have lived in peace here for centuries because we understand our place in the natural order." But to young people raised on science textbooks and urban logic, such words sounded like quaint folklore, harmless local color that added charm to their rural posting. As our elders teach us, what the ancestors hold sacred, the wise do not touch. But wisdom sometimes comes too late, and understanding often arrives wrapped in consequences too terrible to undo. The sacred tradition of Umus was about to be tested by ignorance, and the result would be more horrifying than any nightmare these 6 young graduates could have imagined. The third night began like any other. Ada was reading by kerosene lamp when, around midnight, a soft sliding sound woke her. Still half asleep, she assumed it was wind moving something outside. But the sound came again, closer, definitely inside her room. Ada opened her eyes and froze. Coiled not 3 feet from her head was a massive python, easily 8 feet long and thick as her arm. Its body formed perfect spirals that spoke of deadly grace. But it was the snake's eyes that truly terrified her. They weren't the cold, emotionless eyes of an ordinary serpent. These held intelligence, awareness, curiosity, as if studying this strange creature in its domain. For an eternity, girl and serpent regarded each other. The snake's tongue flicked out, gathering information. Its massive head swayed hypnotically, and Ada found herself paralyzed not just by fear but by the creature's otherworldly presence. Then survivor instinct kicked in, and Ada's scream shattered the night silence. "Snake! Snake! Oh God, there's a snake in my room." Prince was first to reach her door. Taking one look at the situation, Ada pressed against the wall, the massive python coiled on a sleeping mat, his Red Cross training kicked in. Without thinking, he grabbed a heavy log and brought it down hard on the snake's head. The python's death was instantaneous, its massive body convulsing once before going still. "It's okay, Ada," Prince said, breathing heavily. "It's dead. You're safe." The other corps members arrived, staring in shock at the enormous serpent. "We need to dispose of this quietly," Emmanuel said. "No need to cause a fuss." So in the early hours, 6 young Nigerians buried a snake in a shallow grave, thinking they were cleaning up an unfortunate incident. They had no idea they had just violated a sacred law protecting the village for 3 centuries. They had no idea the python Prince killed was a sacred guardian, a direct child of Ik herself. They had no idea that the moment divine blood soaked into sacred ground, alarm bells rang in realms they couldn't see, awakening fury that had slumbered peacefully for generations. As they congratulated themselves on handling the situation efficiently, the spiritual temperature began changing. Wind picked up, carrying scents of no earthly flower. Night sounds gradually fell silent, as if the forest held its breath. In each sacred grove, ancient carved figures began weeping tears that tasted like blood. The spring feeding the village's water supply bubbled with unnatural vigor, its crystal clear water taking on strange colors. But the 6 graduates slept peacefully. It would be their last peaceful sleep in Umus. The 4th day began with signs that should have terrified anyone familiar with the village's spiritual landscape. The stream that had run crystal clear now had an odd reddish tinge, not brown muddiness but deep red that pulsed with internal movement. Village animals cowered under houses, whimpering and refusing to come out for food. Chickens had gone silent. Goats huddled together, eyes wide with terror that animals feel when sensing nearby predators. Most ominous was the complete absence of birds. Trees that had been alive with chirping now stood in absolute silence, as if every winged creature had received a warning humans couldn't hear. Around midday, the supernatural revenge began in earnest. Ada was teaching when the first scream echoed across the village. Then another. And another. Within minutes, terrified voices came from every direction. She rushed outside to see a sight that challenged everything she believed about the natural world. Snakes were everywhere. Not just a few, hundreds, Thousands. Serpents of every size were emerging from the ground, dropping from trees, slithering out of houses, moving through the village in streams of scales and undulating motion. But these weren't ordinary snakes behaving ordinarily. They moved with purpose, coordination, like soldiers responding to battle cries. Their eyes held the same supernatural intelligence Ada had seen in her room, and they were all moving toward the center of the village where the core members' quarters stood. Villagers fled their homes in absolute panic. Families ran carrying children and possessions, women screamed prayers, men who had lived in harmony with sacred serpents were now running in terror from creatures that had become something beyond natural. Prince found himself surrounded by a circle of pythons studying him with terrible, intelligent eyes. They didn't attack, they simply watched, waiting for some signal. The village's life-giving water source had turned completely black, with an oily consistency that absorbed light rather than reflected it. But it was the sound that was most terrifying. The snakes were making sounds, a low, harmonic humming from all of them at once, creating a supernatural chorus that vibrated through ground, trees, and the bones of every living creature. Rising above this otherworldly symphony came a voice. Not from any single snake, but from all collectively, a voice like wind through ancient trees, like water over stone, like words spoken before human language existed. The sacred has been violated. The guardian has been murdered. The contract has been broken. The words were in local dialect, but everyone understood perfectly, as if meaning bypassed ears and spoke directly to souls. Payment must be made. Balance must be restored. The guilty must answer. King Bantu came rushing toward the village center, falling to his knees amid the serpent invasion. "Ik," he whispered. "Great goddess, what have we done to deserve your anger?" The snakes formed patterns around the 6 core members, not attacking but creating living mandalas that pulsed with supernatural energy. The message was clear: these humans were the focus of divine attention. Chief Priest Zema arrived, his face grave with terrible knowledge. "The goddess speaks," he announced. "Someone has killed her child. Someone has spilled sacred blood on sacred ground. The ancient covenant has been broken, and it demands justice. As our elders teach us, when the sacred is violated, nature herself becomes the avenger." The avenger awakened in Yumuse was beyond anything these 6 young people could have imagined. The supernatural revenge had only just begun, and already the rules of the natural world no longer applied in this place where ancient powers had been disturbed by modern ignorance. The royal summons came at sunset, delivered by Chief Priest Zema as supernatural chaos continued swirling around the village. Snakes had not retreated with daylight, their presence had intensified, creating living rivers of scales flowing through every street. "King Bantu requires your immediate presence," Zema announced to the 6 core members. "Come now, and speak only truth. Your lives depend on it." The walk to the king's compound was unlike anything they had experienced. Thousands of serpents lined their path, not threatening but watchful, creating a corridor of supernatural judgment that seemed to evaluate their every step, breath, heartbeat. King Bantu's compound had been transformed into something resembling a courtroom where cosmic justice would be dispensed. The king sat on his carved throne, no longer just a village leader but the earthly representative of forces predating human civilization. Chief Priest Zema held ritual items that pulsed with internal light. The council of elders formed a semicircle, their faces grave with knowledge of what would unfold. Most unsettling were the snakes, following the core members into the compound and forming concentric circles around the gathering, their bodies creating living geometry humming with supernatural energy. 3 days ago, King Bantu began, his voice carrying harmonics from the earth itself. This village was at peace. For 3 centuries, we have lived in harmony with sacred forces that protect us. Our waters ran clear, harvests were abundant, people prospered. The covenant between earthly and spiritual realms was strong. His ancient eyes fixed on each of them. Last night, something changed. The goddess Ik awakened in fury. Her sacred children fill our streets. Our life-giving waters have turned to poison. Our village has become a place of supernatural reckoning. Chief Priest Zema stepped forward, raising a staff carved with shifting symbols. The spirits have spoken. A sacred guardian has been murdered on sacred ground. Blood has been spilled violating ancient laws. The covenant has been broken by those who do not understand what they have disturbed. The terrible truth dawned like an unwanted sunrise. Ada began crying great sobbing tears from depths of terror and guilt. It was in my room, she whispered. There was a snake by my pillow. I screamed. Prince came to help. Prince's voice was barely audible. I killed it. I hit it with wood. I thought I was protecting her. I thought it was just a snake. Just a snake, Chief Priest Zema repeated, his voice heavy with tragedy. You killed a sacred guardian. You murdered a child of the goddess herself. You spilled divine blood on ground protected for centuries. King Bantu rose, his face showing sorrow and terrible knowledge. The penalty for such violation is death. Not by human hands, but by spiritual withdrawal. The goddess will reclaim what was taken. You have 7 days before your spirits are called to answer. 7 days to live. The pronouncement hit like physical blows. But Chief Priest Zema raised his staff again. However, the goddess is not without mercy for those acting in ignorance rather than malice. There is one path to redemption. Hope flickered in 6 pairs of young eyes. The sacred guardian you murdered must be given burial rites as if it were a human being of great importance. You must prepare the body, dress it in fine cloth, place it in a proper coffin, conduct funeral ceremonies as if burying your own king. You must do this with your own hands, speak words of genuine repentance, and acknowledge the sacred nature of what you destroyed. He paused, letting the requirements wait settle. Then, before tomorrow's sunset, you must leave this place forever. You must never return to your muse. You must carry this knowledge to others, so future ignorance might be prevented. Relief came with the bitter taste of permanent exile. We will do whatever is required, Prince said immediately. And we will leave, Ada added through tears. We will never return. We will tell others about the sacred traditions we failed to understand. The burial ceremony that evening was unlike anything your muse had witnessed in living memory. Under watchful eyes of thousands of serpents and Chief Priest Zema's grave supervision, 6 young Nigerians performed funeral rites for a creature they had initially seen as a dangerous pest. The python's body was washed with sacred water, anointed with palm oil and herbs. Ada and Ruth, guided by village women, wrapped the massive serpent in the finest cloth, white cotton decorated with gold thread, reserved for respected elders. Emmanuel and Neddy constructed a wooden coffin from Iroko wood, carved with symbols honoring it. Prince, whose hands had delivered the fatal blow, performed the most difficult part, speaking words of genuine repentance. Great Ik, he said, his voice breaking, I killed your child in ignorance. I destroyed what should have been protected. I broke a covenant I didn't know existed. I am sorry beyond any words I know. As the coffin was lowered into a grave in the village's sacred grove, a remarkable change swept through Yumu's supernatural atmosphere. The thousands of snakes began retreating, not fleeing but withdrawing in ordered formations, like an army that had accomplished its mission. Village waters began clearing, black poison giving way to crystal transparency. The oppressive spiritual weight started lifting, replaced by something resembling forgiveness. But for the 6 core members, the lifting of supernatural danger came with permanent banishment's bitter reality. King Bantu appeared as they loaded possessions into their departure vehicle. You have learned what you came to learn, he said quietly, speaking with simple human compassion. Though the lesson was harder than any would have chosen. He handed Ada a carved wooden pendant, a miniature snake coiled in infinity's shape. Carry this as a reminder. Let it help you teach others about respect for the sacred, about ignorance's price, about power that sleeps in places where ancient covenants are kept. As they drove away from Yumu's forever, the 6 graduates were no longer the confident young Nigerians who had arrived just days earlier. They had been fundamentally changed by forces their university educations never prepared them for. The village sealed their empty quarters with protective rituals, ensuring future visitors wouldn't repeat the same tragic mistakes. In the sacred grove where the python rested in its proper grave, spiritual balance slowly began restoring itself. The story became part of village oral history, a teaching tool for future generations, ensuring the lesson learned through such terrible cause wouldn't be forgotten. The 6 never returned, but they carried Yumu's lesson into careers, marriages, families, and communities, each becoming teachers who shared what they learned about spiritual forces, cultural humility, and the price of disturbing what should remain in peace. As our ancestors teach, the truth earned through suffering becomes light for those who come after.